So I just talked to you guys about the problems that we face with what we see on our computer screen not translating into printed ink sometimes, and that is an issue of being out of Gamut. So we're going to look into that right now. So we are going to open from our chapter 5 photos the image called Flowers JPEG. So I need to get back up here to our book files. Textbook, Chapter 5, Flowers. All right, here we go. So last video I talked about the first color photograph or first color image being created by a black and white camera with red, green, and blue filters shot over it, and then they projected them all onto a wall and they were able to see color. So in Photoshop, we're going to see how this behaves as well. In our layers panel, in this family, we have two other tabs, and we're going to turn open the channels panel. Excuse me. If you can't see it here, go under Window and put a check mark by channels, and it should be available to you. So what we're seeing right now is a composite of the red, green, and blue channels mixed together, and that's our RGB. So if we turn off all of these one by one and we look at just the blue channel, I'm going to turn on the picture one more time. So let's make a note. These flowers are relatively blue, these are yellow, and then we've got some greens. So when we turn off everything but the blue channel, this is what we see. So blue light is allowed to shine through wherever it's bright white, and blue light is blocked wherever we see black. I'm going to just zoom out of this a smidge. It looks a little pixelated. Let's look at our green channel and just look at green alone. Green light is allowed to come through wherever it's dark, and it's blocked wherever it's white. So green is kind of the middle tone here. And then finally red, just turn on red alone. And red light is allowed to come through wherever we see white, and it's blocked wherever there is black. So again, these blue flowers shine through wherever we see white. The blue light is getting through. So blue and green light make yellow. Green and red light make an even richer color of the cyan. And when we bring all of them together, we see all of our colors. This is an RGB image, which means light from behind is illuminating in red, green, and blue, and in mixtures to give us what we see here. Excuse me. All right, so we are now going to take a peek at how this changes when we shift to CMYK, which is how we print with inks. So we are going to switch from image, we're going to go to image mode. Notice we're in RGB. Now before you click on this, I want you to keep an eye. Well, actually there's going to be a step in between. So let's click on image mode CMYK color. And before it does it, it says you're about to convert to a US web coded profile. That's our paper in the US. This may not be what you intend. Are you sure? Now watch when you say okay, watch what happens, especially to the blue in these flowers. Ugh, they're really dull, aren't they, compared to what they were? If we do an undo, Command Z, that's what we see on our screens. That's what we show our client. And then if we redo that, that's what gets printed, and the client is not very happy. You always should check for colors that are out of gamut. In other words, there is no ink that exists that will print that color. We can't get this really vivid fluorescent-y look with ink right now. So we have to be very aware of that. Let's do this. One more time. I want to show you that if we do this and leave it, so CMYK color, okay, it's bad. And notice up in our tab, it always shows us what color mode we're in. So I can see this is CMYK. Let's do a save because we think we have to, and we send this off to the printer. And then we go, oh, we need to go back to RGB. Let's see what that was. Image, mode, RGB. And if I had sound effects right now, they would go, wah, wah, wah. Doesn't work. That detail is lost when you save it as a CMYK. It can't be put back in. It doesn't know what RGB ever existed like. So we were just able to undo because we hadn't saved the file. Once we save the file, it's a one-way street, and we've made this ugly. So just because it looks good on screen does not necessarily mean it will look good in print. When you're working on anything in Photoshop, you stay in RGB mode as long as humanly possible. I'm going to close this again, and I actually am going to open it. Don't save. It's probably too late. It's too late because I saved over it. You always should work in RGB mode when you're on a screen. Why? Because that's what's being produced by your monitor. That's the only color mode it knows. So work through your entire document, and at the end, right before you send it to the printer, a commercial printer, don't worry about your home printer or the one in the Mac lab, but when you're sending it to a commercial printer, you do want to convert it to CMYK 9 times out of 10. Every now and then a printer will say, give me the RGB file. We have the software and the algorithms and the technology to change it for you so that it will be the best it can be. But more often than not, you send your CMYK files to the printer. So at the very end, when you switch color modes, if something looks bad, you have to either decide, okay, I can't help it, this is all I can do with inks, or you need to think of some workarounds. Maybe there was something you could have done to give it a little bit better look, but keep it in Gamut. So if we look over here at our color channels now, I'm going to turn off all of them, but I'm going to start with black. In this case, it's kind of the opposite. Dark areas, think of this as a rubber stamp, or the parts of the rubber stamp that are elevated that therefore hit the ink. Dark areas are picking up ink. So black ink is being picked up in all of these dark areas. If we go to yellow ink is being picked up in these dark areas, a little bit here, nothing here. Switch to magenta now. Magenta ink is being picked up in dark areas and ignored in white. And the same with cyan. It's being picked up in these dark areas and put down on paper. So when you combine cyan and magenta inks, you get this. When you add the yellow to them, you get this. And that's not a good look yet. We need to add the black or the registration, and that's our final composite CMYK image. So the way the black and white channels appear are different. Think of print as being a rubber stamp, like I said, and dark areas are the ones that are picking up the ink. It's probably easiest on this black channel to understand it. So one thing that we need to also understand, and if you look at your textbook for this on page 120, the amount of colors that we can see on our computer screen are larger than we can reproduce with inks. That means that RGB has a larger gamut than CMYK. We can see things on our screen, see colors on our screen that we cannot reproduce with ink. If you look at that graphic on 120, it also shows us kind of what the human eye can see. And you can see that CMYK, what inks exist, are within that hard line that kind of looks like a house. And the dashed line is the colors that we can see on screen. The human eye can actually discern even more colors. So RGB has a larger gamut, more color than CMYK, and that's something that we always need to be thinking about and checking at the very end before we send a photo or a composite, a Photoshop document out to be commercially printed. All right, checking for things that are out of gamut, we're going to work with later in this class, almost towards the end, when we talk about preparing images for offset printing or commercial printing. But one of the views that we can do is under the view, there is an actual option for gamut warning. And if we click on this, everything that is lightly grayed out, those are colors that are out of gamut. So in this RGB photo that I'm seeing on my screen, there are currently no inks that are going to reproduce this exactly the way I see it on my screen. So that gives you a nice warning, and it's these colors in here. If I were to go and change this to a CMYK color space and say OK, I'm watching up here to see what changes, because this is where it was out of gamut. There we are. We are in CMYK mode. It's not quite as vibrant or fluorescent-y, but it certainly is fine. So in this case, I wouldn't have any problem with colors being out of gamut, and you can see they're not. We're in CMYK, everything is fine. So just kind of a heads up on something that we will be looking into later in this class when we start talking about sending our files to commercial printers.